course that I had done at that point on Indian philosophy, which a professor called Professor Venkat Krishnan was teaching. And I think that course changed my life, because when he used to give us, translations of the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita to read, or writings by Swami Vivekananda, it made me think very deeply about a few things. First thing is, who am I?
Mm.
And I realized that we are all bigger than just this body. We are all here, and we can design a purpose and a meaning to this life. Right? We all have our swadharma. The second thing that I realized when I was doing this course was that comparison with others is irrelevant, because everybody has their own path and their own journey, right, in this life. And their context is different from mine. So why would I look at somebody and feel good if I was better than them? And why would I look at somebody who's better than me and feel bad? Right? Instead, can I look at somebody who is better than me and get inspired? And can I look at somebody who is may not be as good as me and say, okay, how can I help? So, because of that class, I think, and of course, the ego knock that I had received when I was 17 years old, it really allowed me to reflect and ask, what is the purpose of this entire thing, and to remain fairly calm through that. And I think from then on, I also realized that I was going to approach life from that angle, by asking myself, what is my unique role and purpose in this life, and do a job that allowed me to live that. I think, and that happened then during MBA, and then afterwards when I was working, while I was being appreciated, it was not. I was in a comfort zone. I was raising two children. I was fine. But in everybody's life, a moment comes when you realize that the environment is not as supportive as it was before. And I think when I encountered an unsupportive environment at work, I realized that I had almost brought it on myself, because I had not played the game. I had not been aware of what was going on around me. I had not built the important stakeholder relationships. I had just barreled my way through, assuming my integrity, authenticity was going to take me ahead. So I think that lack of political awareness was interesting, and I take accountability for that. I should have thought about that. I should have got better at that. But that was a good moment of sitting back and asking, okay, am I truly living my swadharma? Is this where I light up? Is my career going to be something that I can look back on and say that was a life well lived? And the answer was that I was enjoying some parts of my work, but not all of my work. So I had to ask myself this fundamental question: did I care about the money, the title, and the status? And the
Mm.
answer was no. So then what did I care about? So I spent a few months discovering that. What is it? Where in my life do I light up? What kind of work makes me light up? And when I discovered that, that is when I left the corporate world, and that was about a decade ago. So I think these two other incidents also have had a huge role in my life, because I think I've maybe just spent 14 odd years in the industry, and I've almost spent almost a decade on my own doing work that leaves me feeling deeply satisfied on a daily basis.
I'll come back to that later. But when listening to Haritha, I can clearly see the signboard, which is right behind you, Jirina, who looks
Mm.
outside dreams and who looks inside awakes. I mean, that's how I experience you. And I think self-awareness hence becomes such an important skill or realization that once you understand yourself better, I think then you can lead a more meaningful life.
Yes.
And talking about awareness, I think there's one thing I wanted to ask you, because this is one question, or this was a question I had a few years ago before I understood about coaching, especially leadership coaching. Because a lot of the leaders, they seem to confuse coaching sometimes with a therapy session.
Yes.
Sometimes they feel it's like maybe they're going to open up. They don't want to open up. They don't want to be vulnerable to an outsider. And they have these misconceptions about coaching. Could you just walk us through what an ideal coaching relationship looks like? What's the journey that a leader usually takes on these coaching sessions? And what separates a good coachee relationship from a one which is not so effective?
See, coaching in my mind is a process where a coach creates a safe space and helps their client explore themselves deeply enough to build the ability to self observe and therefore arrive at their own wisdom. That's my definition of coaching. Coaching is not about fixing anybody. Coaching is not about adding a new skill to your repertoire. Coaching is essentially about helping you find your own wisdom. Now, what do I mean by that? If I were to ask both of you, Jirina, Girish, can you quickly tell me one area of growth that you have?
Because we were doing a value-based exercise. What are our top values? And based on those values, it guides us the path that we want to
Yes.
take. So the
Yes.
path we want to go next on, one of the things that I need to develop in is subject matter expertise
Okay.
in the field that we are in. So I feel that is my immediate current need, desire to improve on.
Got it. Okay. Now think about it this way. Um, Once you know, sort of know what is your area of growth, you will also know what you need to do to build or overcome that area of growth, right? You
Mhm.
will go ahead and if you have to build subject matter expertise in, say, learning and development, you will go find people to talk to. You will read books about that. You will read case studies. You will basically build, you'll work on that area. And sometimes when you know what you have to do to overcome an area of growth, sometimes it's easy to do, but sometimes it's very difficult to do because we all actually know, intellectually, we all know what to do to become better versions of ourselves. Sometimes it's easy to do, sometimes it's difficult. When is it difficult? It's difficult when my mindset comes in the way. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, that, let's say you don't identify as a learning and development person at all. Let's say your mindset is that each person should be off doing their own learning and development, and and you don't need to build that level of expertise to be in that business. Let's say you have an opinion about like that. If that is the case, right, and that's what's going on at your mindset, then you will not actually do anything to build that subject matter expertise. I'll take another very simple example. There was a person I was working with recently, and their area of growth was that they were emotionally illiterate. This is their words, right? They say that I'm emotionally illiterate because I have never been taught that emotions are important, right? And the person had reached that stage in their career where they had teenage children, and they also had a team of very senior people whom they were managing. And they were beginning to realize that emotional illiteracy was coming in the way because their kids were unwilling to talk to him, and the team members were not building emotional trust with him. They were building logical trust, but they didn't believe that he had their back. So when he came into the coaching conversation, initially started out saying, I want to be able to inspire people more. And ended that conversation with realizing that they were emotionally illiterate. They didn't know what was going on within their own selves. And therefore, because I don't know what's going on within myself, how can I understand what's going on within you? So then how can I connect at an emotional level? It does so they were able to therefore say, okay, what they initially thought is I am going to now learn to become a very inspirational speaker. That was the original plan of action that they had. That actually changed completely to saying I'm going to become emotionally aware of myself. Then I'm going to attempt to become aware of others. Then I'm going to see if I can respond from that place of awareness. And then I'll see if I'm able to inspire people or not. So, what I'm trying to say with this example is that all leadership gaps exist at three levels. There is a knowing gap, a doing gap, and a being gap. A knowing gap is a knowledge gap. In your case, Girish, learn as much as you can about learning and development. That you will do. The doing gap is you have to you have to build a skill in that area, right? So in his case, after having learned about emotions, he had to learn how to identify the emotion that was arising in him. How does he respond using that emotion rather than reacting in a very strong way? And what is that skill? What's the skill of understanding other people's emotions? What's he going to observe about others that's going to tell him about emotion? So that's the skill. That's the doing gap. And then there is the being gap. What's going on in my mindset that prevents me from being good in this area? And what can I actually do? His mindset was boys don't cry.
Hmm.
Right? Therefore, boys cannot feel emotions. From there, he had to shift his mindset to say everybody has emotions. It's a human condition. It's a very powerful way to connect. So there needed to be a reframing within him at the mindset level that had to change. So what a good coaching relationship does is that it allows the client to become fully aware of what's going on within their mindset, the belief system they have, the values that they carry, the fears that they have, their innermost needs and motivations, and take all of that and say, okay, what about that is enabling me today? What about that is coming in my way? How can I reframe my own mindset so that I become the version of myself that I wish to be. That's, I think, a coaching relationship. Right. So now, in order to make for that kind of a conversation to happen, as you can imagine, two things have to happen. One, the coach has to have the skill to create a safe space and to ask good questions, of course. That's the idea. And be non-judgmental. I think that's one of the most important things, right? As a coach, you can never judge anybody else. And the second thing that's required is that the coachee has to participate voluntarily. So whoever is my client, they can't be forced to join a coaching relationship, right? So because they are going to walk in saying, okay, my organization wants me to be coached. What's their agenda? So it's equally important for the coach also to make it very, very clear that while, of course, the organization might have decided that this relationship is needed, the coach is there in order to help the client find their own wisdom. Right? So it doesn't matter what the organization ultimately wants, because the minute the client becomes more aware, accepts themselves, reframes their mindset, their response is anyway going to enable the business better. So that's, I think that's how it works. So when leaders worry that coaching is going to make them too vulnerable, etc., to some extent, it depends on the skill of the coach to create that safe space where the person says, you know what, no, I can trust this. I can trust this relationship. It will remain confidential. I'm willing to speak up. Uh, and the other thing that happens here sometimes is that some people are just not willing to dig deep, because arriving and confronting your mindset is not easy. Like, it requires you to really become aware of some potentially painful early memories also. So not everybody wants to do that, and if they don't want to do that, the coach won't push beyond a certain point in time. So, like any L&D initiative, you get what you put into that relationship. So, if a client is willing to be more vulnerable, of course, they are going to get more out of the relationship. But the coach also has to be skilled. So the ideal coaching relationship, the client should have a choice. Who do I want to be coached by? They should speak to at least two or three coaches and see where is that safe space or connection getting built. And once the person chooses, right, who they wish to be in a coaching relationship with, then it becomes a much more voluntary process. So usually in coaching, there is a discovery process. Like you asked me my origin story, we get the origin story from everybody. So they can actually see how their mindset developed over time. And what are some of the beliefs they carry? What are some identities they hold on to? All of that. Once they become aware of their mindset, then they contextualize it to their leadership. What is the job they are doing? What are the challenges they have to solve? How does their mindset help them? How does it come in the way? And if it is coming in the way, what does reframing that mindset look like? Right? And then they will go and try from that reframed mindset. They will try a new set of responses and behaviors. Some will work, some will not work. They'll iterate. They'll get better at that. But ultimately, I think in all of this, in a good coaching relationship, the ideal outcome is that the client is able to self observe themselves from now on. Once they have finished the coaching relationship, they should have the ability to say, I understand my mindset. Now I'm going to keep watching myself. Almost like what we call as witness consciousness in Indian philosophy. I'm going to be able to observe myself and say that, and notice what's going on before somebody gives me feedback. And I'm going to be able to connect that to how do I need to show up differently, and I'm going to practice my behaviors on my own. So it's almost like that awareness, acceptance, reframe, response becomes a habit. And that's the goal of any coaching conversation, that the person walks away skilled to almost self coach from then onwards.
This is good because when I'm listening to you describe the coaching process, it sounds so much like it fits the definition of emotional intelligence by Daniel Goleman. It's
True.
about having that awareness of how your emotions impact your actions, not just on yourself, but also on others.
Correct. Or your beliefs. If you have a belief,
Yeah,
I'm not good enough. By
yeah.
the way, that's a shockingly large number of people who have this belief that I'm not good enough. Right. So when there's a
Yes.
belief I'm not good enough, then it can manifest in many different ways. I will either work so hard to constantly prove that I am good enough, that I'll still do well, but I'll be exhausted. Or I'll say, you know what, I'm not good enough anyway, why bother? So I'll
Yeah.
not even make an attempt. Right. So, but in either case, I need to know that I believe I'm not good enough for me to actually start showing up differently. Unless I accept that, yes, I don't think I'm good enough, then unless I accept that, how do I move ahead? Right? If I don't accept that, then I'm going to be stuck in the first case. Then I'm going to be stuck managing my stress, learning how to
Mm.
breathe deeply. I'll say, I think maybe that's the thing I need to do. In the latter case, I'll tell myself, no, no, I'm going to have a project plan every day. I'm going to get up at 5 o'clock. I'm going to somehow make things happen. So
Mm.
I'll stay stuck at the behavioral level, which is rarely permanent, right? Usually, permanent change only happens when our mindset shifts.
Yeah.
I think it sounds very like it's a long process to really work with a leader to understand and have that mindset shift.
That's why they prioritize. Yeah, you're right. So, because it's a long process, if you are covering the entirety of mindset, that's a very, very long process. That's why we contextualize it to what's the highest priority areas for you to work on. So, whatever the duration of coaching might be, hopefully, the prioritized areas can be addressed.
Like, what if I'm HR leaders and I'm listening to this and I already believe in what you say? I know that my leaders in the organizations need the coaching practice, need the coaching program, and I want to implement this in my organization. I want to know how to pitch this idea with other stakeholders for them to buy in. So hence, I want to know the structure, the timeline, and how it look like.
Got it. Okay. See, usually we say that there should be at least 6 coaching conversations with a person, but that's very coach dependent. See, there is an international body called the International Coaching Federation that does come up with some best practices. And, I know many coaches who say that, look, I will only sign up if I get to coach somebody for a year. So, one session every month for a year. And there are some coaches who say that it should be at least 10 conversations. So I don't think it is necessarily cast in stone. What would be useful if I was an HR leader and if I was considering coaching as an intervention is to ask myself, what's the change I need to see in my leaders? Right? Where are they getting stuck today? What's the change I need to see? Is that an area that requires a group intervention, or does it require an individual intervention, or a combination of both? If it is an individual intervention, are they ready for mindset level work? Are they ready for coaching? And if the answer is yes, that they'll really benefit from it, and if they like the idea of creating that space for themselves and delving deeper into themselves, then I would go ahead and find coaches who can potentially do that work. And after talking about what are the kind of challenges they want to actually help the leaders solve, you can decide the duration as well. I, for example, have coached people from all the way from just 3 months to 2 years, depending on the complexity of the engagement and the number of conversations that were required. So it really depends on the context and the need of the leadership team.
Mhm. And from your experience, may I ask, have you ever seen any mistake when HR want to engage coaching program and there's a mistake that it's actually you see?
Yeah. See, most of the time, because coaching is an expensive proposition, right? It's not something that is usually made available to everybody in an organization. Usually, organizations do coaching interventions either for high potentials or for more senior talent. So, therefore, it by its very nature, it tends to be a little bit more thought through, and the intention with which HR leaders seek coaching is usually the right one. Usually. The only mistake I have seen is occasionally using coaching in place of managing performance. So, for
Hmm.
example, I have had one or two experiences where my clients have said, I'm almost ready to give up on this person, but I want to give them one last chance, and coaching is that one last chance.
Hmm.
Right. So, there, if it truly is a one last chance, I think it's a fine thing to do, particularly only if the person is volunteering, right? So, that volunteering thing needs to remain. However, if what you are essentially trying to do is build a case that this person's performance is not scaling, and if you're wanting to use the coach as one of the suppliers of information that this person is not doing well, that is a mistake, because coaching is a very confidential process. Number one, and number two, um, a coach is not there to judge an individual's performance. In fact, if that is what I was doing, nobody would be vulnerable with me ever. My job as a coach is to actually be a cheerleader for that person and to help them work with their mindset. That's my job. So that's, I think, the only mistake I've seen HR leaders do in terms of coaching, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, listening to Haritha, it's quite, I can just imagine the safe space you create for leaders to open up and be vulnerable because you're not judging them. But have you heard of instances where leaders refuse to dig deep, as you were talking about earlier, as one of the blind spots? What is one of them? Is this one of the most common blind spots you have noticed among leaders? They refuse to go deep.
No,
Okay.
actually, no. So in my experience, most people, when they realize that they can actually have a useful conversation with somebody who is non-judgmental, they tend to open up and they tend to be willing to dig deep, but not everybody. And what I have seen, what prevents people from digging deep is one, I think, is a great fear of vulnerability. Again, coming from the mindset element, right? So if throughout their life, if they have lived as a strong person who shall never be weak, then it is very, sometimes it takes a while for them to say it's okay. It's okay to let go. It's okay to be truly authentic. That can come in the way. Another thing that I have seen come in the way is if I don't forget my title when I am in a coaching conversation. If I am a managing director and if I'm in a coaching conversation and if I keep thinking I have to have the managing director on, hat on, I have to become the human first. Once I become the human and I go through my journey, I understand myself, then I will anyway put the MD hat on because I have to contextualize my mindset to my current leadership role. But when you start with that, and if you expect it to be a mentoring conversation, that's where sometimes I've seen a little confusion because leaders, not every, if you haven't been exposed to coaching before, then people don't really know the difference between mentoring and coaching. And therefore, it takes the very first conversation. I always actually help people differentiate between both so they know what to expect in a coaching conversation. So, in the chemistry meeting, I'll actually tell them that, mentoring is a mentor is somebody who's a subject matter expert in an area that you want to get better at. So, you will seek that person out for their expertise. You will expect advice, you will expect teaching, you will expect contacts. That's a mentor. Whereas a coach's area of expertise is human beings. So, what you should expect in a coaching conversation is an exploration of you as a human. Right? Therefore, there is going to be hardly any advice. I don't advise any of my clients. There will be no advice. There will be no contacts or this, that, or the other. And what you will get instead is hopefully a good set of questions that allow you to work with yourself. So sometimes that confusion also can cause the leaders not to be willing to dig deeper. So usually it comes from a place of fear or confusion, not from a place of ill intent. I think most people want to get better at what they are doing or who they are as human beings. But I have been called idealistic in the past, so I might be wrong.
So just to follow up on that, so let's say what I understand is during that initial conversation with the coachee, you explain the expectations, you provide that safe space so they are more vulnerable. But let's say that is not helping. They're not, as you said, they are still carrying the title with them instead of being the human, or they are afraid that you might divulge some information. How do you help such coaches to actually shed these fears, shed the title, and become human with you?
So I'll of course tell them it's confidential, right? That goes without saying. Whether they believe it or not depends on how I come across in that conversation. So the other thing that I do is I mirror it back to them. I'll say I'm observing that you're not getting deeper in this area. Is this something I believe in order to make progress you have to go a little deeper? Are you willing? So I'll take the permission, and because as I said, it's not easy, right, to confront yourself. It's actually not. So if they say that yes, I'm willing, give me some time, or maybe next conversation, I'll usually follow that lead a little bit. But if the person says yes, can you help me with one or two more questions? Can I just sit in silence for some time? So there are techniques and process. The expertise that coaches bring is we have the frameworks and the tools and the techniques to help a person feel more grounded, more calm, more and giving them a structure to explore themselves. Because actually, all of us have the capacity of sitting back, reflecting on ourselves. Right? But it becomes easier when somebody presents a framework to think about their mindset, right? So that's the skill that coaches would bring. So that also can help. Sometimes leaders get a little inebriated by their power. Okay, and there's a nice word in Indian philosophy for it. It's called mada. So And when you are inebriated on your power, then you use your power as an opportunity, not as a responsibility. And when that happens, they tend to use a coaching conversation also as an opportunity to further their power. So again, when that happens, I will always mirror it back to the person saying, this is what I'm noticing. I usually say, this is what I heard, and then I'll summarize what I heard. But I'll say it in my words, which is, of course, a very short summary of what may have been a 20-minute self-reflection process they would have done. Mine would be a minute or two that I would reflect back. And hopefully, if it is a powerfully enough constructed summary, it hints at the mindset. And usually it does cause the person to pause and to think and say, you know what, probably this is where it is coming from. And I'm now beginning to get why it is important for me to consider working on this.
Would you be comfortable sharing any of your frameworks that you use?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. We'd love to hear that framework.
So, I'm part of an organization called Aroha, and we attempt to bring in Indian philosophy into leadership. And one of the very powerful concepts in Indian philosophy is this concept of witness consciousness, what in Sanskrit is known as Sakshi Bhav, or the observer self, or being in the Drig space, not in the Drishya space. So you don't have to think about all of the Sanskrit, but essentially it is about witness consciousness. And what that essentially is telling us is that we all have the capacity of not just being an experiencer of a moment, but the observer of a moment. When you are experiencing a moment, you're very involved in it, right? But when you're observing a moment, then that distance helps you gain perspective, and it helps you see things that are broader than just you and your reaction. So let's take an example, right? And this experience is to do with my son, who is a very critical thinker, and he does a good job of figuring out what's working well in an environment and what is not. But he's a very different student from the kind of person I am. Right? So I used to be a very sincere, committed student, believing that the school was doing the best that it could. And he looks at the school system also fairly critically. So one of his habits is to come and criticize the school or the education system in front of me. And when I am being purely an experiencer of that moment, right, and I am only looking at how his comments are landing on me, then I start wondering, okay, is he not enjoying himself? Why is he always complaining? Why can't he look at the positive side of things? Uh, all of these are thoughts that are running in my head. And if I stay only as an experiencer, then I will not respond, I'll tend to react. So in the past, my reaction used to be to say, why are you always critical? Right? Surely something good happened today. Tell me that. Forcing him to look at what might be positive. And when I'm being an experiencer, I'm very involved with my own emotions and my own thoughts in that moment. And my reaction comes from there. I'm not looking at anything else. Right? Whereas if I could be an observer of the moment, right, then what would I notice? And I have done this exact practice with my son, so I know exactly what happened. The minute I was able to say, you know what, let's step out of the situation mentally and let's look at the entire situation as a whole. What all do I notice? Yes, I notice my irritation, but I also notice that he's coming to me because I'm a safe space for him. I also notice that he is actually accurately critiquing a system that obviously it will not work for everybody. He happens to be one of the people it doesn't work for. And I also notice that otherwise he does his job. He's always on time with his assignments. He does everything on his own. He doesn't use generative AI or copy anything from the internet, right? So he does all the right things as a student. So when I do that, when I look at the school system and that I also have some complaints with it, when I look at what he is doing otherwise as a student, when I look at all the entirety of it, sitting in the observer space helps me do that, gain a broader perspective. When that happens from the observer state, a response is possible because I'm not just involved with myself, I'm looking at the broader context situation and the other person. And from there, my response was actually a very different. I remember asking him that, so at this point, do you just want me to listen to you? And then what response would be useful for you? How can I help you in this moment? right? And then he told me, today I only want you to listen to me, ma. Or you know what, this is what I'm struggling with. Let's talk through this after I have finished sharing. So that observer, the moving from the experiencer to the observer state, moving from the drishya state to the drik state, is one of the most powerful leadership capabilities anybody can learn. And this doesn't have to be at the leadership level. Any human being can learn this and should learn this, because what it allows us to do is to respond rather than react. And one of the frameworks that we have is a way to move from the experiencer state to the observer state. We call it the Awareness, Acceptance, Reframe, Response Framework, the AARR framework, which is our coaching framework. So we first help people become aware of the experiencer they are, what's going on within them, what's the mindset that's at play there. Then we help them accept that they have that mindset. Sometimes it's not easy to accept that you think you're better than others, for example, or you think, others can never be trusted. So some of these truths, the beliefs that you carry are difficult to accept. So we help them accept their current mindset and ask, is it time to change? And once the person accepts that it's time to change, we help them reframe their mindset. If today you believe you're better than others, what's a more authentic reframing of that belief? Then they will actually come up with one way where they say, some people are better than me, some people are not as good as me, but there's something to learn from everybody. Whatever the reframing might be, it changes per person. They reframe, and then we ask, okay, we help them figure out from that reframed mindset what would be a new response that you might come up with. And actually, we have an AI coach that uses our AARR framework, which is on our website. So people are free to, in fact, it is free, obviously. So people are welcome to try that as well. But that's one of the concepts that we use, the awareness, acceptance, reframe, response framework.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a lot like having that meta awareness,
Yes.
awareness of your awareness in that moment.
Witness consciousness, exactly.
Yeah.
Witness consciousness applied in leadership.
Hmm.
That I think is the key, because you've got to contextualize it. Otherwise, witness consciousness becomes, most people tell us it's very abstract. We don't know what to do with it. And our submission to everyone is, you can take a wonderful concept and you can contextualize it and make it practical. And this is one way of doing that. So exactly to your point, Girish, it is about meta awareness, witness consciousness made practical.
Yeah, true. And I think what I see is it's extremely important for a leader to have this, because the impact that they have is disproportionately high than any of their reports could have in that meeting room.
That's
I
right.
mean, you can make out the environment of a meeting room just by looking at the way people, their body language when they come out of a meeting room. You can know what happened in that meeting room.
Exactly. And witness consciousness actually allows you to see how are you landing on others. Because one common leadership challenge that I see is most people have an intention of coming across a certain way, but the way they actually land, their impact is quite different. So when the gap between intention and impact is quite high, then leaders are always confused. Why am I getting this feedback again and again? I'm not like that. Right? So if you have to truly understand whether your intention is translating into impact, you have to have that ability to self-observe. And that is why actually with most of my clients, the minute they build the ability to self-observe, I actually say you don't need to be coached anymore.
Mm.
I think that sounds like a sustainable way of improving self all the time.
And it's doable by yourself. That's the beauty of it. I think I really wish every learner out there would realize that we can all continuously improve and get better, get closer to the version of the person we wish to become on our own. We can do that. It's a painful process to learn it, but it's learnable.
Again, I'm an HR leader, but I couldn't get a buy-in from my stakeholder to really hire an external coach or really release the program. What can I do in my capacity?
I think I need to know why there is resistance and why do I want to bring in a coaching intervention. What am I noticing in my leadership that I believe a coach would be helpful for? And have a conversation about that with my business leader. That, here's what I'm noticing that when you're together as a team, very few people speak up, or we tend to devolve into a conflict situation without being able to constructively emerge from there. There are some things I'm noticing. That's why I think, as a It might be helpful to have an external perspective for maybe we can have a team session where we have a coach come in and talk to us, or I'm noticing that one or two people, and start with the leader themselves. And do you think this is what coaching is about? Do you think it'll be helpful for you? I think that's where I would start and always contextualize it to business results. Why would any leadership team, and correctly so, say yes to an intervention unless I will see a change that's going to help me get my business results better? And hopefully with less pain in the process. So if I am able to have that conversation with my business leader, then I will know what is the right intervention. If coaching is the right intervention, when the business leader is convinced an intervention is required, then actually with my experience, if I'm an HR leader, I will know what's the best kind of intervention to suggest. Right? And then I can go ahead and have that conversation. But I would definitely say one thing, right? If leaders don't want to be coached, they won't be coached. HR leaders can hire as many coaches as they want, but it has to be a participative process. The client has to want it or has to see the value in it. They may not want it, but they have to see the value in it and be willing to say, you know what, let's try it.
In one of our situations that we heard, where recently spoke to a client where they seem there is a strong need for coaching because the leaders, apparently some of the leaders' behaviors is impacting the team so adversely that there are people who have quit. So the retention rate
One
has
leader?
gone.
Just one leader?
A few leaders are there. They have identified, and even after having that conversation, the HR having the conversation with the leader about what's happening, the impact, it seems that the leader refuses to take responsibility for that and is shifting the blame on the employee or the peer who quit.
Right.
Now, what do you do in this situation?
Okay. And is this the highest level leader in the organization?
Maybe let's say -2, -3.
-2. Okay. So if that is the case, I would see what's happening here is that this person is not accepting reality, or they're not accepting their part in the reality. Right. So when I'm not taking responsibility for my own actions, the first thing that has to happen is I have to be made aware of the fact that I do have that responsibility. And if my HR partner is not able to share that with me, my boss can share that with me. Right. But the truth has to be told and the truth has to be accepted. At least enough for the person to say, look, I don't fully get it, but I'm willing to explore. At which point in time, feedback, etc., from multiple sources can actually cement that understanding of how they are landing on others. Because clearly the intention and impact are very different here. Or for all you know, they actually intended to show up that way and they're happy the other people have quit. We don't know. Right? We don't know what might be going on. But I think that responsibility that you should need to pick this up, whether you do anything about it or not, that's of course your choice because that's about personal development. But here is your responsibility and the consequences of that. And are you willing to live with it? See, most people, in fact, all of us, we are all, the human condition is such that if the cost of my current way of being is lower than the benefit of my current way of being, nothing will make me change. If, for example, I have this thing of sitting in a victim box, but if sitting in the victim box allows me to feel very satisfied with myself and, constantly blame other people, and if I'm enjoying being in that box, and the cost of that box, which essentially is that, I'm causing great harm and I'm not solving the problem, I'm only adding to the problem. If that is something that I'm happy to live with, then I'm not going to change, doesn't matter however many interventions happen. So therefore, most HR leaders can do a great job, and many of them do an absolutely fantastic job of acquainting the leader with their current reality. This is your current way of being in terms of how you're landing on others. And this is the result it is having. Is it okay? Are you okay living with it? Should the organization be okay living with it? And if the organization is okay, because many organizations are okay living with very difficult people as long as they get business results, by the way. And if the person is okay living, being that way, then you have to wait and watch, and you have to constantly provide a mirror. until the cost becomes heavier than the benefit.
Yeah, one last question. If the listeners want to find you, where can they find you?
Oh, they can write to me at haritha@aroha.co.in, haritha@aaroha.co.in. Or they can find my company on www.aroha.co.in, AAROHA.co.in. That's our website as well. And yeah, what I wish for everybody in this world is well, good sense. I think that's one thing that everybody needs right now. So one is good sense. I think the second is to accept who you are with completeness. Accept the entirety of who you are. Then look at, is it coming in my way? Is it enabling me? And just work on those parts that are of yourself that are coming in your way. Because the reality is that none of us is an ideal human being, and we will never become an ideal human being. There is no ideal human being. So it's a continuous journey. So instead of being disheartened by the fact that you may have multiple areas of development, I would say take it as an evolution of a person. And maybe next time when you are reflecting on yourself, there'll be new areas to work on, but you would have made yourself a better human being. If you're constantly evolving as a leader and as a person, you are definitely positively impacting the people around you. And that is an amazing value that you're adding to this world. So do be happy with that as well.